Hello everyone, welcome to my Batman Arkham Origins. I am the Night difficulty, no damage walkthrough. This is going to be the Gotham City Royal Hotel, and we'll also be doing Deadshot side mission in this video, which is what you're seeing me do right now, where we just have to piece together this crime scene, which will eventually lead us towards the Gotham Merchants Bank, which is where Deadshot is stationed, and we get to do his boss fight there, if you can even call it a boss fight, because the fight reuses the same exact boss format as with Two-Face when you were playing as Catwoman, or Harley Quinn in her boss fight on Harley Quinn's Revenge. And it's where, for whatever reason, the boss character that you're fighting, in this case it's Deadshot, they have increased health for no reason at all. And Deadshot is classed as an armored henchman, so the only possible way you're going to damage him is if you do the knockdown smash, and he can take multiple knockdown smashes for no reason at all. It's just there as a cheap way to deliver some kind of fight, because apparently, in this day and age, boss fights are just fake fights, and it's just characters getting all these capabilities that don't match their own physical capabilities. And so what you're effectively going to be resorting to is clearing out a bunch of guys, which will then free up some space to allow you to deal with Deadshot. You're going to be using your smoke pellet in order to blind Deadshot after you do the first knockdown smash, and you just repeatedly chain knockdown smashes on him until eventually he's scripted to take someone hostage, and then you have to do one last knockdown smash against him, and the fight is over. Yeah, does that really sound like a boss fight? How the hell do you class that as a boss fight? It's so fucking lame. It's honestly like one of the dumbest ways to make a boss fight. Just give Deadshot capabilities he doesn't deserve that don't match his own physical capabilities. Like, I could understand doing multiple knockdown smashes against someone like Killer Croc, for instance, or against Mr. Freeze, because at least they have the capabilities necessary to withstand stealth attacks like that, and at least this was justified in Batman Arkham City with Mr. Freeze's boss fight, and at least did something interesting where you had to mix up your approaches. But no, they couldn't do something very similar with Deadshot and actually capitalize on his ability to do like perfect shots, like shots that shouldn't even be possible to do unless you have like a very high degree of training, which is definitely what Deadshot has gone through in order to gain the kind of skills that he has. No, it's just a reskin of Two-Face and Harley Quinn's boss fight from Arkham City, and it's a fake fight. It's just lazy, and you can't even call this fight difficult for any other reason other than, oh, because it takes longer. It takes longer because of some really stupid reasons. In fact, this honestly leads me on to a tangent I'd like to discuss regarding my previous live streams of Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil Village. So, in my very first live stream of Resident Evil 7 recently, I did the remastered version, and I was just going through the game normally to celebrate the remaster, even though the remaster could have been better because there are some audio bugs and some other problems, like, for instance, Marguerite just unleashing her swarm of bugs on you for no reason, even though she can't see you. It's almost like she can see you during the cutscene, where she's actually staring at you and she closes the door right in front of you, but for some reason that classes as like a detection for whatever reason. But moving past that, while I was doing the live streams for Resident Evil 7, Ether had joined my live stream, and we got into quite the heated argument with each other regarding the 10,000 lei restriction that he did for Resident Evil Village. And he genuinely, and I mean genuinely, believes that Resident Evil Village is serviceable for 10,000 lei on Village of Shadows difficulty, even though you are dragging out the scenarios, you are exposing the simplistic designs of the enemies, you're completely invalidating any kind of pattern the bosses and the enemies have by just dragging out the encounters. Like, what is the whole point of having this kind of diversity to the enemies if when you are progressing the fight for as long as you are dragging it out, it has no value anymore, and it almost feels just about as repetitive as what you would be getting if the boss had like one attack. That's really it. And that's what I got with Moreau, that's what I got with Urias, that's what I got with Sturm, that's what I got with Lady Dimitrescu, that's what I got with Miranda. Really the only decent boss fight that I even genuinely enjoyed on my 10,000 lei restriction, which is what I did as a live stream after I did my Resident Evil 7 remastered live stream, because Ether caused me to lose sleep for almost an hour just trying to contemplate how anyone in their right mind could even have these kind of inhuman thoughts. Like, how does he not know what a dragged out scenario is? How can he possibly call those fights not dragged out? And he said that his whole definition of dragged out is arbitrary, but like, what the fuck does that mean? mean? And then also, like, when it comes to certain designs, like with Bella, I've acknowledged so many times the broken designs with Bella. And the broken design I want to talk about specifically is the broken hitbox on her grab, because Ether actually supports the fact that Bella's grab is completely broken. I was absolutely flabbergasted that he genuinely supported the whole idea of Bella's grab being broken because he said it promoted skill in knowing when to actually run away from her attack. And I'm just like, why the fuck would you ever want to resort to that kind of lame excuse in broken designs to justify something like that? You do not use the realm of broken designs to justify skills. I mean, he sounded about as delusional as the developers of Resident Evil Village. And I hate to say that about Ether, because like compared to Tynard, Ether is a lot more tolerable and he's a little bit more friendly compared to Tynard. But there were genuinely some moments in my live stream where I really wanted to just give Ether a slap in the face or on his fucking ass, or really just shake his head like crazy just to get him back into reality, because the things he was saying made no sense in the realm of common sense and logic. Saying that a broken design is actually allowed to make the game like more skillful. That's no different to what Tynard said to me in his college essay calling me shit, when he said that doing like any kind of minimalist restriction or like Knives Out in Resident Evil Village or on like Resident Evil 4 actually makes the game like serviceable, like showcasing the full potential of the game, or for actually showcasing strategies that actually feel believable, like smart tactics. And if you want to hear more about this point on Tynard, check out my if you like Catwoman's Revenge DLC, then something seriously wrong with you video. Check out that video. It is titled, "If you like Catwoman's Revenge, something is seriously wrong with you." Where I just talk about how broken Catwoman's Revenge is, and it tied in heavily to the points I was talking about with Tynard. But I genuinely cannot believe that Ether would ever support bad designs like that. And here I thought he actually had a bit of sense. And I just hate to say this about him, but like, I'm addressing him as if we're not friends right now. If we were friends right now, I probably wouldn't be saying all these things right now. But because of the fact that I have to address these points, and with how much Deadshot's boss fight just reminded me of the kind of comments Ether left right there, I have to address it as if I'm just seeing Ether for the first time. I cannot believe he genuinely believes that. And also, he was talking about permadeath as well, and he supports the whole idea of permadeath, saying that it makes you a better gamer. So he's attributing the run to what's allowing you to actually like develop the skill set required to understand the game, not on your own abilities, not on your own dedication. And in some ways, when Ether made that comment and he was just genuinely like defending it, and you know, he says that, oh, when you're going to like a stealth encounter, for instance, restarting the checkpoint, that just leaves with no consequence. You get no consequence whatsoever if you choose to restart the checkpoint for a stealth sequence, for instance, and permadeath forces you to understand it better. I'm sorry, dude, but you are only attributing that to one subset of individuals. And in some ways, it almost comes across as insulting, because I don't do no save. I don't waste time trying to do permadeath, because permadeath is just incredibly disrespectful to the game. And like, he says that he supports the whole idea of Naughty Dog putting in permadeath in The Last of Us Part 2, when permadeath just feels like something very disrespectful on the developers' parts. It's almost like they're completely being disrespectful to the core designs of The Last of Us Part 2 and what exactly The Last of Us is meant to be. It's meant to be a story-driven game with really satisfying gameplay, and all you're doing with permadeath is making the player sit through like cutscenes that honestly feel like load times with how much you're going to be skipping them all the time, and then you're just causing the player to hate on certain sections for taking way too long, or you're making them like hate designs that shouldn't have the kind of venom that they should deserve. Like, it's just, you cannot seriously support the whole idea that permadeath is what makes you a better player. So in some ways, what, are you saying that I'm a worser player because of the fact that I actually take the time to study the sections and use the checkpoints, and I want to actually respect the pacing of the game by using the checkpoints? Like, there are certain situations where I'm okay with a checkpoint not being in a section. I'm okay with this in crushing difficulty on Uncharted 4, or with grounded difficulty on The Last of Us Remastered, because in some cases, having the checkpoints in the middle of the encounters just throws off the pacing of the encounters. That I understand, but at least they make it a choice. they give you the ability to either restart the checkpoint or with actually restarting the encounter. I mean, this is really more so the case with Uncharted 4 and The Last of Us Part 2, not so much with The Last of Us Remastered because you only have the ability to restart the checkpoint. But at least Naughty Dog didn't try to say, oh, you have to restart the whole entire chapter, or you have to restart the whole entire game. Like, why would you ever want to use that kind of schema to learn a game? You're not learning the game. All you're learning is just how bad the game is when you're getting screwed by very bad designs. And Ether's only describing, like, once again, one subset of individuals. And it's like you're being so overly strict as to not appreciate the other designs in the game. Or by saying that if you don't do it this way, you're not playing the game right. And it just came across like the standard Ninja Gaiden player who just creates all sorts of stigma against all sorts of players who may not be like the best in the professional players' minds, and so they call those kind of players shit, and they say that people who don't do like really stupid restrictions for Ninja Gaiden are automatically bad players, yet they completely design these kind of runs in a way that doesn't fit the core designs of Ninja Gaiden. If you want to hear more about this, check out one of my parts from Ghostwire Tokyo titled Venting Anger Towards a Toxic Community. That's what I titled it in my Ghostwire Tokyo blind playthrough. But it just feels like the way he presented that whole argument with me, it just felt so limited in scope. It just felt very, like, ignorant. It felt, like I said, very limited in scope. It just felt like he wasn't thinking very clearly. Like, he just was trying to apply a lot of specificity right there. And, like, when he's talking about the whole idea of permadeath, it almost feels like he's describing it from the perspective of, oh, just making the run look good for a video. Not that it has any relevance to actually understanding the section better. Like, there are multiple possible ways of actually understanding a section. I wouldn't be as good at the Evil Within if I actually took the time to actually understand the game. I didn't have to rely upon restarting the chapter, like the entire chapter, or restarting like the whole entire game to understand the sections. No, what you would be doing is just, you'd be understanding like the earlier chapters of the game, but then you'd have to waste time just like getting back to like the previous point you were at, and then just working up to there. It's almost like what you'd be getting in Dark Souls, for instance, or like Dark Souls 3, where like you have to go through like so many phases, like three phases, and like you want to understand the final phase of a boss fight, but you have to waste time going through like the first and second phases to understand the third phase. That's not the proper step process you go through to understanding a section. And pretty much by the end of my Resident Evil Village livestream, when I did that 10,000 lay restriction, and I was at my wit's end with Ether, just saying the kind of comments he was saying, and just defending so many of the bad designs in Resident Evil Village, it really feels like Ether is a 10 steps rather than 1 step kind of person. Almost like what he described with Bella, how he says he defends the whole idea of Bella having a shitty hitbox on her grab, when there are better ways of justifying why exactly Bella is able to hit you with that grab. But when it literally looks like you should be able to crouch under it, and she just hits thin air. And not only that, but you have to deal with the shitty movement of Resident Evil Village. You have to deal with the dishonest audio when Bella is right behind you. Or like with Cassandra, for instance. I think it's way worse with Cassandra, because it's so hard to create a reference point for knowing when to actually run away from Cassandra's grab, because of how erratic her movement is. And then you're getting screwed by the fact that the way the daughters move around, they either sway to the left or to the right. And if they sway in an unfavorable fashion, even if you successfully time when you're supposed to run away, they can still get a cheap hit on you because of the way they path towards you. You're dealing with so many random variables that are completely unearned and are not built within the framework of skill. You cannot say that that kind of fight promotes skill by encouraging very broken designs like that. And Ether's like argument against this whole point is a very lame excuse. He's saying not every attack needs to be crouched under. Like, what kind of a half-assed excuse is that? What the fuck kind of excuse is that? Not every attack needs to be crouched under. So rather than favoring a very, like, simple option, like using the crouch intelligently, like what you get with Lucas or like Jack Baker in the End of Zoe DLC, you're saying that I have to waste time just running away from an attack that looks like you should be able to crouch under it, and you have to rely on the most awkward movement possible to even avoid that kind of attack because of how shit its hitboxes are designed? What, you're going to say it's okay for the Lycans to actually do attacks that looks like you should be able to crouch under them, but you actually can't, and they get so much more momentum on their attacks? I mean, honestly, if I were to give an analogy to this, Ether sounds like some kind of computer specialist who designs the most broken PC ever. Objectively, it is bad. It has, like, graphical errors, it has frame rate issues, it has input delay, it has all sorts of errors, and yet he still releases it to the public, and he says that, oh, you have to have a special touch when actually handling this PC, yet it's fucking impractical to do. And really, it just felt like Ether was syncing with the developers' mindset. Like the same developers that made Resident Evil Village, a team that I widely regard as being the stupidest development team ever for Resident Evil Village. He was syncing with that mindset when he was saying the most ridiculous comments ever for his video. And it seriously just left a sour taste in my mouth. And you know, I still try to tolerate Ether's presence after that live stream. I really do. And I know Ether left a comment on the community page when I was saying that I need to take a break from Resident Evil. Like, that's what Ether left me at right there. Like, with how much Ether put me through so much stress, just trying to contemplate, like, everything he was saying, and just questioning, like, my own place as a gamer. Like, that's the kind of thing that the Resident Evil series just brings upon me as sort of an unfortunate side effect. Like, as a sort of opposing force to the idea that Resident Evil is the greatest series ever. Because it's the greatest series ever, it's also gonna have, like, the greatest toxicity ever. And it really felt like there were certain points in my live stream where Ether and I were displaying pretty toxic behavior towards each other. And it seriously put a lot of stress upon me, even though I was, like, laughing a lot during the live streams, even though, like, there were some moments where I was, like, having a joking personality. Like, even though I was expressing that, just deep down, it was going to put a lot of stress upon me, just trying to contemplate how any human being could have the kind of thoughts that he has. Like, it's just, when I hear those kind of comments from Ether, like, I almost want to say, you need to reevaluate your position as a gamer if you seriously believe in those kind of thoughts. And it's almost like he doesn't understand the history of games. He doesn't understand, like, the normal psychological process of the brain. And, like, when he's supporting the whole idea that the fights in Resident Evil Village aren't dragged out on 10,000 Lei, for instance, yet he's looking at my live streams. I am acknowledging this. The fights are dragged out. I am literally stripping the AI of any sense of complexity by just making them seem very simple, very predictable, very boring. That's exactly what happens when you add time as a variable to that case. It doesn't matter how complex your attack pattern is, it's still going to be very boring. Like, even Seraphim 17, when he's fighting someone like Slave Knight Gale on Dark Souls 3, when it's taking him as long as it's taking in order to beat Slave Knight Gale with the kind of restrictions he's using for Soul Level 1, he still considers Slave Knight Gale to be horribly dragged out, and just, he has an absurd amount of HP that is just completely unwarranted, and it really drags the fight down. And I should know, because I saw Seraphim 17's walkthrough of Dark Souls 3 with the Soul Level 1 restriction on New Game +7, I believe, and it was seriously just boring. Like, it didn't matter how, like, flashy a lot of the animations looked. You were going to be punishing, like, a set amount of animations. You were just going to be wasting time waiting for, like, Slave Knight Gale in order to do the correct moves in order to punish him. Like, that's what I was getting on Resident Evil Village with the 10,000 Lei, and yet Ether was just defending those kind of dragged out fights to the ends of the earth. And he even asked me the whole question of what I define as dragged out. Like, I shouldn't have to define what dragged out is. Anyone and their mother would be able to look at those kind of fights and call them dragged out. So many of my subscribers looked at those fights and called them dragged out. And these are not the kind of subscribers that just blow smoke up my ass, just allowing me to preserve my sense of arrogance. These are the kind of subscribers that are able to voice such conflicting thoughts to my own. They're able to be completely honest. And they were completely honest when they said that the fights were dragged out like crazy in Resident Evil Village when I was doing those kind of restrictions. Like, you cannot say that I have to define dragged out. If I have to define dragged out, that's like saying, oh, I have to define what breathing is. Like, it seriously just confuses me a lot. Like, Ether really came across as sort of the impressionable individual, where he's so easily swayed by what a lot of pro gamers do, or, like, what he defines as pro gamers. Like, I don't rely upon that kind of distinction anymore. I don't rely upon those kind of individuals to dictate how exactly I should view a game. I view the game from the logical perspective. I view the game from the scientific perspective. I view the game from common sense. I try to sync my own mindset with the developers' mindsets to try to comprehend their own designs and actually make these kind of objective statements about Resident Evil Village or other games that suffer from very low qualities. That's the kind of mindset I try to sing to, and ironically, the only way I was able to even break free from my own stupidity originally was to have someone like Edge Reactor voice the kind of comment of, do you even know how to think for yourself? I mean, I still banned Edge Reactor in the end because I hate that guy, and I hate the fact that he supports stupid runs, and I hate the fact that he can be an idiot a lot of the times, and he can be flat out rude most of the time. But the fact that he said that statement, I think in some ways it contributed to my development as a gamer. And I really made sure not to sync with the mentalities of people that, at face value, like, they might be skillful, but when they don't have the right mentality when approaching their games, or they are so quick to call things like simplistic, or when they're so quick to call certain things bad when they actually aren't bad, like, that right there is more important than how good you are at a game. Because it doesn't take much effort to understand the game. It probably takes a lot more effort to understand the game and also understand the mentalities involved with the designs of the game. Like, that takes a lot more effort, and I have no support over people that flat out can be good at the game, but they don't have the right mentalities for it. And speaking of the whole idea of simplistic, and I apologize that I'm talking so much about Ether, I should be talking about this, but there's not much to really talk about with the Gotham City Royal Hotel, or even with Deadshot's boss fight, but when we get to Bane, and when we get to that Predator encounter before Bane, that's when I should actually talk, because I did encounter some issues. And Bane in particular is pretty broken, and he has the ability to do all these sharp turns that shouldn't be possible for a charge attack. And it forces you to take it nice and slowly. You're going to be relying more on running away rather than using your evade, because having a very stiff evade, as is the case with the Arkham games, it's not complementary to the flexibility that Bane has provided when he's making the sharpest turns possible with his charge attack. And this, it's not just applied to Bane, it's also applied to the Enforcers as well, because the Enforcers also have the ability to do very sharp turns as well with their charge attack. So I'll talk more about it when I get the chance. But talking about the whole idea of simplistic, Ether as well, he makes these kind of comments about certain sections being simplistic, when you have to understand that when you're talking about a section being simplistic, you have to call something simplistic within the context of the kind of game it's in. Like, if we're talking about a very advanced game, like, for instance, Bloodborne, for instance, and you have just one boss that does nothing but one attack, that's when you call it simplistic. But when you have, like, a survival horror game, like Resident Evil 7, and you understand that with Jack Baker, for instance, like, I understand that Jack Baker, I just get him to loop his attack, but I still call the fight amazing, because the developers, even though they made a simple fight, they made it fun because of the fact that you have cool music, you have the fact that the weak spots actually feel like they matter. If you were to put someone like Moreau in Jack Baker's area, that fight would be crap. Because Moreau has way too much life, they completely removed all sense of stuns with him, and his moveset is so fucking simple and so broken, and they didn't even contemplate what the hell they were doing when they were placing Moreau in the kind of environment that he was in. Like, that's the main distinction right there. Old Capcom knew where to stop when designing Jack Baker's third fight with him in the main game in Resident Evil 7. But with Moreau, they decided to do more than what was physically possible, and with that came really poor quality. You do not do more than what is actually provided within your budget or within your time. You cannot do that. Oh, and also watch this, by the way. That right there is bullshit. Why is he able to grab me during that kind of counter animation? It's the same kind of crap I had to deal with when I was doing counterattack animations near the one-armed lieutenants in Batman Arkham City, and they would just hit me during the counter animations. But that was at least fortunate that when the Enforcer grabs you, it doesn't do instant damage to you unless you fail to break out of the grab. But just talking about the whole idea of simplistic, you have to say that knowing the actual core designs of the game, like, if it's so far below the baseline value for the core designs of the game, like, if you're going to be talking about something on par with that of your alpha value in statistics, for instance, obviously you have your p-value tests, like, the whole idea of something being significant, like a significant result, you have to have a p-value less than 0.05, right? That's normally how it goes. I mean, sometimes the alpha value changes, this and that. But, you know, think of it on those terms. Like, the whole idea of simplistic, it kind of has a significance value that is tailored to your alpha value, basically. Think of it like that, and how it varies with each test that you do, or in this case, with each game that you go to. And, like, the way you design your model in statistics, or the way the game is designed. Like, when you're adding certain variables to, like, a multiple linear regression model, or when you're adding a lot of complexity to a game. it changes the way like the p-value is read, and like most of the time the p-value will change whenever you're making changes like that. Like you got to look at it from the framework of the game. That's the important thing right there. And that's why I say that Jack Baker's third fight with him on the main game for Resident Evil 7 is not a simplistic fight. When you have something like Moreau, or when you have something like Sturm, for instance, and you're dragging out their encounters, or like with Alcina Domitres, for instance, when you're dragging out their encounters, relying upon the dumbest methods possible on your 10,000 lay restriction, and you're having to gimp yourself so much, and you're having to just strip their design so much, that's when you can call those fights simplistic. And when you're at least doing those fights normally, and when you're actually like speeding up the fights, you can't even bring up the whole idea of simplicity. Like time is a variable to consider when talking about a simplistic fight. A fight is going to be made even more simplistic by how long it takes. A short fight, you can't call a short fight simplistic, because by the time your brain even forms the neural connections necessary to even contemplate the whole idea that this section is simplistic, you've already done the fight. And it's a survival horror game, for crying out loud. You're supposed to be saving up on your resources to do very creative things against the bosses, to actually make them seem like they actually are not so simplistic, even though in actuality they can be simplistic if you're doing these really stupid minimalist runs. And that's another problem I had with the 10,000 lay restriction for Resident Evil Village on Village of Shadows difficulty. I diluted any sense of creativity with the fights. And I was just simply doing the same strategies that I was doing normally, but it was just taking longer to do. And that's really where a fine line is drawn between skill and patience, yet Ether disagrees with me on that. He says that skill and patience are the same thing, and that you can't have any kind of line in between them. I mean, that's not how he phrased it, but that's how it really came across when I was even bringing up the whole idea of the line between skill and patience. And it seriously just doesn't make any sense how anyone could blur the line between skill and patience. The skillful part is actually understanding how to dodge each of the moves in a way that actually makes sense. There's skill involved with actually understanding the broken designs put in place and actually having the humility necessary to say that this fight is completely broken with certain designs like that, like what I can say with Bella's broken hitboxes on her forward combo or with her grab, and it's the same thing that applies to Cassandra as well. And understanding those moves is the skillful part of it, but actually having the patience to put up with just repeating the same pattern over and over again, and I'm just completely like diluting any sense of creativity with the fights, and I'm just making these seemingly complex patterns seem more simple than they actually are. Like, that falls into the realm of patience right there. That's really where a fine line is drawn. And, I mentioned these points about Ether, and I mentioned like it's a big deal, but it is a big deal because this is a guy that is so popular on his channel. He has like 2,000 subscribers, I believe, on his channel, whereas I am not even at 1,000 on my channel right now, and he's presenting a mentality that is going to like be apparent in the minds of so many people that watch his videos. He's essentially like dictating what exactly professional play is from a very weird perspective, and that's really where I have to take this seriously. That's why I'm discussing it right now. That's why I'm treating it as seriously as I am, because you might look at it and just think, oh, this guy is just whining about this guy. But it matters when this is a guy that is popular with so many people and so many people praise his channel. And there's a lot of videos on Ether's channel that are definitely worth praise, like when he does his like no save, no damage restrictions and he's playing the game normally. But when he's glamorizing restrictions like 10,000 lay and calling them serviceable for the game, and when he's also saying that the evil within as well, when he says the evil within is worse than Resident Evil Village in the sense that it's not compatible with the idea of no damage, no save, yet the evil within is a lot more complex. It actually fits the whole criteria for no upgrades, no keys, and the game actually works as intended with those kind of restrictions. And that game might have like broken designs, but it's nowhere near to the same degree as Resident Evil Village. And at least that game has some really cool environments. It has a wide variety of enemies to fight. It has some really great mechanics to it. I mean, like, minus the whole idea of the random variable on your pistol just causing the bullet to fire outside of the reticle, which is completely bullshit. But that game has so much going for it, and Shinji Mikami knew what he was doing when designing that game. If you put in the Evil Within team, and they designed Resident Evil Village, they could have made Resident Evil Village so much better as a game. And I swear, guys, after Ether made that comment about the Evil Within, he's definitely caused me to have more of an urge to do another walkthrough of the Evil Within with the restrictions of Akumu with no upgrades, and I might even make it a full walkthrough. I'll definitely do a full walkthrough of the game. I won't separate it out into chapters. I'll just put the whole entire game into one video, just to do like one massive commentary, just like what I did with Resident Evil 3 Remake, Resident Evil 7, and Resident Evil Village. I think it'll be a real treat to do that. But just to finally conclude this point on Ether, Ether made a lot of really bizarre statements that honestly made it very hard to stomach during my live streams. And you know, going through that, like going through all of that with Ether and really understanding that this is almost Resident Evil's fault in a sense, because Resident Evil having the kind of diverse playstyle that it does, it honestly shoots itself in the foot when it comes to promoting this kind of toxic behavior on myself and also on Ether. But, you know, like, we're always talking about what dictates, like, a good playstyle and the like, but, you know, like, talking about the whole idea of 10,000 Lei or Knives Out and Resident Evil Village, you can't even bring up that whole kind of point, because you can tell the game is not built for those kind of restrictions, surely. Like, I don't understand, like, Ether has the gall to say, how can you not see that? He actually said that to me in my live stream. He actually said, how can you not see that Resident Evil Village is perfectly compatible with the whole idea of 10,000 Lei? I cannot believe he said that. Like, that's no different to what Taran Malikos said to Cal Kestis in Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, where he tells Cal Kestis, how can you not see that it's hopeless to restore the Jedi Order, and that my quest for power is better than actually restoring the Jedi Order so that they could learn from their mistakes? Like, you could tell that Taran Malikos has completely lost it with his obsession with power, and he was not going to share any of that power with Cal Kestis. He was going to keep all that power for himself. Like, Cal could clearly see what Taran Malikos is going to do, and yet Taran Malikos is all like, how can you not see that? Like, you think Cal Kestis is going to fall so easily for that? Like, this is what it felt like with Ether. Ether felt like Taran Malikos in that moment when he actually said, how can you not see that? Like, he genuinely believed it. Like, similar to how Taran Malikos voiced that question from a perspective that doesn't fall within the realms of reality, Ether literally had the gall to say that, and it was just one of the other bizarre comments he decided to make in my live stream of Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil Village. And there's going to be a lot more to say with regards to Ether's comments, because there's a lot of things that he said that were just so confusing, and maybe I'll get to them, maybe I won't. I'm just kind of hoping I don't bring him up anymore in this walkthrough, because I don't feel like they're a topic worth lingering on, but who knows, we'll have to see in the future. But we now have Bane's boss fight, and I mentioned before that Bane's boss fight is not good because there are problems with Bane, like, for instance, his ability to do sharp turns when he does his running attack. And you have no choice but to run, because the stiff evade of the Arkham games is not built for this kind of flexibility provided for Bane. And Bane is able to resist all of your gadgets. The only gadget he can't resist is the shock gloves. The shock gloves, you can at least put Bane into a beatdown animation without ever having to do the ultra stun. And when you do go for the ultra stun, you gotta bear in mind that Bane varies with whether he's going to let you do the ultra stun on him or not. So I recommend, to reduce the percentage of chance of error, you get Bane to do an attack, jump over him, and then initiate your beatdown on him, where you just do the ultra stun and then you do the beatdown. That's just what I found to be the most consistent way to ensure he doesn't hyper armor through your stuns, but still exert caution nonetheless. And whenever I get Bane into this position where I do the takedown on him and I deplete him of his Venom enhanced abilities for the time being, I then do another beatdown on him and I build up to the gold multiplier again, because what I'm trying to do right here is I'm going to, after I do the beatdown, use my quick batarang to knock over the henchmen and then do the multi-ground takedown. The henchmen are a random variable when you're dealing with Bane, and vice versa. Like, Bane can be a random variable when you're dealing with the henchmen, because there's no telling what he chooses to do. I mean, he's more so of a threat whenever he's in this Venom Enhanced state. And also, by the way, whenever Bane does that animation where he presses the button on his hand and he goes into this Venom Enhanced state, you need to walk to the top right. You need to walk towards Bane's left side, because he will always overshoot you whenever he tries to do his charge attack. That's the best way to get past it. But of course, when you're dealing with the henchmen, you gotta watch out for them, and they can take advantage of the camera changes that occur during this fight, because whenever the camera changes, whenever you're doing all these cinematic animations with Bane, it can throw you off as to where you're going to be facing, or like where the henchmen are, and so that can be a huge random variable that is completely unearned Like when you're fighting the game like that, when you're fighting the camera, that is just badly designed. That should not be a thing. But you just gotta make sure that you take out the henchman as soon as possible, so that Bane is the only one that you deal with. And also, did you see that? Whenever Bane blocks your gadgets, he kills your combo, so that's another problem as well. The quick batarangs can be hit and miss in this fight, just another side effect of the fact that this game had a very rushed development. But if one of your batarangs accidentally prioritizes Bane, you'll lose your combo, and you'll have to rebuild your combo all over again, and open yourself up to a lot of the holes present with this fight. But we're very close now to beating Bane. I can't tell you the amount of times I've gotten to this health threshold over here, and I've just been cheaply hit. It's one of the most frustrating moments ever. I think it happened at least 3 times before I managed to nail it, and I don't know why the game froze just then. I think that's OBS just screwing up. I don't think that happened within the actual game. I could be wrong, though. I don't know. But all that's left now is to just survive until Bane goes into that cinematic moment that cues the end of the fight. And we get to save the Joker, and we get this moment with Batman's moral code where he saves the Joker. And obviously he's going to save the Joker because he needs to know the Joker's operations, he needs to understand like the victimology, like he needs to help out the police with victimology and the like. Like that's why Batman saves Joker, and also you know, he has the chance to save him. He has to take it right there. I mean, he probably didn't need to, but you know, he's a new villain pretty much, and Batman needs to understand him. That's why he mainly saves him. That's my rationale for this. But obviously, this is a huge imprinting moment for Joker, because this is the moment where his fixation on Batman begins because of the fact that Batman goes out of his way to save a psychopath like himself. And also, I think it's an interesting angle to have it where those 2 thugs are standing to Batman's side, almost in the same position as where his parents were when they were standing to his sides, and then Joker shoots them. So obviously, that's going to bring up the trauma of Bruce Wayne losing his parents to Joe Chill. And that was a pretty interesting angle to take right here. I mean, look at it. He just straight up shoots these guys, and yet they're still going to be loyal to him because thugs are motivated by money. They've completely been stripped of their morals. But I don't know if that would really be the same case in real life, of course. But I mean, I don't know how often thugs really respect gang leaders or any of these kind of criminal bosses that just kill their own men for the sport of it. Because, you know, there are people that do that as a strength, but then they must be living in medieval times for sure. But yeah, I did like this whole moment where Batman saves Joker. Because obviously it leaves a lot for interpretation, and it gives a more stylistic appeal to the Joker's origins when he's being introduced to Batman, and it pretty much puts the origins in Batman Arkham Origins, which is cool. And obviously we see at the end of this cutscene that Joker is being questioned by Bullock as to why somebody would save him, and Joker just asks the same question as well, which is pretty cool. And I can totally understand why this scene was regarded by many as being one of the best moments in the game. But I haven't included the part where he's with Harley Quinn. I'll include that in the next video, but this is the end of this part of the walkthrough. But let me just showcase some bloopers right now. So, the first blooper you're going to see is in this encounter, because for whatever reason, this mercenary starts shooting at my gargoyle point. I don't know why he's doing this. He's aware of my tactics. He's supposed to be investigating the noise, not doing this right now. So it's like he skipped a step in his programming, which was odd. And all of this is just Bane moments, pretty much. So, right here, you see how sharply Bane turned this, and that was bullshit. And here, he just turned sharply again. It was pretty bad right there. And this right here, see, Bane is able to cancel his recovery frames very quickly, and like that's why you gotta get behind it, but sometimes it still doesn't work. And right here, see that? That's one of those moments where the quick batarang chose to prioritize Bane. I had no combo, and I have to rebuild my combo again, which is stupid. I did not want to prioritize Bane, obviously, and that right there is a great example of Bane taking advantage of the stiff evade. Like, what happens if you accidentally do that kind of evade? You don't have enough range to get away from Bane, and then that right there, I had no possible way of avoiding Bane in that moment. It's just one of those situations where the poor designs are putting pressure upon me for completely unjustified reasons. You don't use poor designs to put pressure on a player like that to then have to game the system or just work within the confines of a broken system like this. Yeah, that's why my options are very limited in that moment. And it's the same thing I could easily say for Ether when he's describing Bella's shitty hitboxes and saying it's perfectly justified. But yeah, hopefully that's the last time I talk about Ether, and this is the end of this part of the walkthrough. Stay tuned for the future parts. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.